What was behind the upgrade for the United States and the downgrade for Europe?
Firstly, it's a pleasure to join you. What we have is that in the case of the U.S., we ended 2020 with an additional stimulus that was provided. And that is an important factor for the upgrade for the U.S. by almost a percentage point. And 2020 also ended in some way in a less worse place than what we had projected for the U.S. In the case of the euro area, we still have strict containment measures in place. The virus resurgence is leading to a decline in mobility, which is much more than what we're seeing in the U.S. And that's part of the reason why, because we have a downgrade for the first quarter in the euro area. For the year as a whole, we have a downgrade for 2021.
So, Gita, I'd like to start in the United States and the stimulus effort, and then we can turn to vaccines and what's happening in Europe too. On the stimulus effort, so the $900 billion is what you baked into the outlook. The $1.9 trillion, is that just a little bit extra for you, Gita? What would that actually do to the outlook, and is it targeted enough?
So, of course, the details, I mean, it still has to be completely settled. So it's not in our forecast. We have a very preliminary estimate that says that about a 1.9 trillion stimulus would raise the level of U.S. GDP by 5% over 3 years. So that's between 21 and 23. I mean, our view is that, of course, we're still in the midst of this health crisis. There is need for much more faster vaccine rollout, for health spending, including in testing, and also for providing support to vulnerable households and businesses. And so, all of those are important pieces that have to be addressed still. And so those are support measures that should be provided.
5% over the next 3 years, they're decent numbers. But, Gita, do you base this on the size of the programme, 1.9, or is there some specifics about the composition of it that the IMF likes and would like to see more of?
So this is, I'm just making a statement about what our estimated impact of 1.9 trillion would be over 3 years. I mean, that's a fiscal multiplier of 0.6, just taking into account what we know from previous data on how much of it tends to get saved based on the package that was talked about. But again, the details still have to be worked out, and so we'll see what exact shape that finally takes.
One thing you've said in the outlook is the mutations, the new strains, and I just wonder from your perspective whether these strains that we're seeing in the United Kingdom, Brazil, South Africa, actually raise the bar to reopen these economies, Gita. How do you think about those things at the moment?
Yeah, I think what it tells us that, while stay at home is difficult and social distancing is difficult, we know that the chances of the virus mutating is higher when all of us are out there and, mixing. And so I think this is an additional reason for kind of being very cautious about going out and very important to wear masks and so on. So, yes, I think we have to, continue to vaccinate at a very high pace. It doesn't change what we need to do. I think what we still need to do is simply to accelerate the pace of vaccine rollout. But also now we have to just make it available to the world as a whole. I mean, the way it is right now is terribly inequitable. Yeah. And we know that the virus mutation can come from anywhere in the world.
What you're building on right now, though, Gita, is absolutely critical. The conversation I'm having at the moment almost every day with market participants is just relative growth, differentials between Europe, the United States. The vaccine rollout is good here, it's bad there. One will do OK, one will do better, the other one will do terribly. Would you be willing to make the argument now that if we don't make a bigger effort to vaccinate those outside the developed world, that ultimately will drag down the global economy at some point anyway?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the arguments are obvious, both on the health side and the economic side. On the health side, because of these new variants, we just know that the pandemic is not over until it's over everywhere. But there's also a strong economic argument. I mean, we estimate that if you can get to a faster end to this health crisis by much more widespread rollout of vaccines and therapies, we would add $9 trillion to the global economy between 2020 and 2025. And everybody benefits, including the advanced economies who stand to gain $4 trillion, around $4 trillion. So this is, a very strong economic case for doing much more now.
Final question, Gita. There is a take among some people, especially in markets, it seems to be a belief that if we have to delay reopenings by an extra quarter or so, it doesn't matter. It won't be growth loss. We'll make up for it the back end of the year into 2022 as well. Do you see it that way?
So, firstly, a couple of things. Even, if you just look at when you have lockdowns, the effect of that on economic activity is much lower than what we had in the spring, last spring. If you look at, for instance, the relation between mobility and economic activity in the U.S., mobility has barely moved that much, but economic activity has continued to recover. So countries have gotten used to functioning with social distancing in place. So the effect is going to be less severe. And indeed, I mean, for many economies, we're entering at higher savings rates among households, so you could still rebound. But again, I just cannot emphasize enough the uncertainty. I mean, there is so much more we still need to know about how this pandemic evolves.